Hello everyone, my name is Brennan Marr, that noise you're hearing is my ventilator. And welcome to Page Turners They Were Not My Star Wars podcast. Today we're going to talk about what you may all recall from the first teaser trailer to Star Wars The Last Jedi. When Luke, standing in the entrance to the tree, says, "It's time for the Jedi to end." Ah. Now that was the final moment in the teaser. But what did that mean? What did it eventually become? Well, let us discuss. Now, when Luke said this line in the teaser, we were all thinking, what in the world is he talking about? And there was a lot of discussion about what that might mean, including the theory that ended up being true, that Luke was wrong. But he's also right. Now, how in the world can that be? Well, let's discuss. The Last Jedi is the most referential to the Star Wars prequels of all the movies in the sequel trilogy. Because we see, particularly in the scene of, I think Luke called it Lesson 2, when he's discussing to Rey the failings of the Jedi Order. He says, now that the Jedi are extinct, they're deified and praised. And then he says, but if you strip away their deeds, the legacy of the Jedi is failure. Or something to that effect, he says. To which Rey responds, that's not true. And Luke says, at the height of their power, they allowed Darth Sidious to destroy them. And then he says to Rey, it was a Jedi Knight who trained, Darth Vader. But Rey says, and a Jedi who saved him, referring to Luke himself. This then leads us into Luke telling the story of the betrayal of Kylo Ren, or the creation of Kylo Ren, I should say. Which is then told from different perspectives later. Now, this is an interesting discussion because this is Luke acknowledging the mistakes the Jedi made in the prequel era. And I believe he's absolutely right. I think that the Star Wars prequel trilogy demonstrates the failings of institutions. The Republic and the Jedi Order as institutions fail. Now, this is not to say that all institutions are bad. But this is to talk about, let's be careful in putting too much trust in institutions. The Republic had become old and bloated and corrupt, crumbling, unable to deal with crises. That's kind of the point of the Phantom Menace, is the Republic's inability to respond to the Naboo crisis without getting bogged down in bureaucracy, without getting bogged down in mistrust. of the fact that they were even willing to trust the Trade Federation, when they're like, we need proof, we demand proof, this can't be true. The Republic being foolish enough to listen. Now, I don't want to get too political, but the failings of the Republic in the Phantom Menace, in their inability to deal with a crisis, reminds me a bit of the United Nations' inability to deal with conflict and violence in the world. Even though almost every country on Earth is a member of the United Nations. The failings of institutions. And the other institution that I'd like to talk about, and that's the point of today's episode, is the Jedi Order. Luke is right when he says the Jedi failed. And to a certain degree, the legacy of the Jedi is failure. Luke, unfortunately, had come to believe that the Jedi Knights were too much trouble and there needed to be no more. Or at least, but he didn't want to be involved and he wanted it to end. And he wanted to teach Rey why it needed to end. But she didn't see it that way. The Jedi Order was blind to Darth Sidious's manipulation. Palpatine, in his guise as Palpatine, fooled them. He seemed like a humble senator from a quiet, peaceful world. He used the Naboo crisis to allow himself to be elected chancellor. And then used the Separatist crisis in Episode 2 in Attack of the Clones as a pretext to him seizing more power in order to create an army of the Republic to fight the Separatists. But no one could see behind the mask who he really was, unless he allowed them to see. This demonstrates how powerful Palpatine, aka Sidious, is. Which reminds me, I have no trouble with his return in The Rise of Skywalker, because this is a powerful guy. He was able to mask his intentions, to cloud the minds and judgment of the Jedi Order. And they couldn't see it until it was too late. They failed. The Jedi failed. Now also they failed, not because of just because of external forces, like Palpatine. They failed from the inside, too. The Jedi, I think, forbidding people to be in relationships, taking very young children, raising them in the Jedi Temple, teaching them about, don't feel. The scene where the Jedi are testing Anakin when he's first brought to the Jedi Temple. And the Jedi are concerned about his thoughts dwelling on his mother, and Yoda saying, you're afraid, and you fear leads to anger, anger leads to hate, hate leads to suffering. All these things to me demonstrate the failings of the Jedi. Now, it's very interesting that the Jedi taught a lot of the Jedi Order taught that emotional connection to family, loved ones, was dangerous. Well, you know what? It was in the case of Anakin, because of his very unwise love of Padme, which is more, I want to say that's more lust. That's more, it's not as pure a love as it could have been. You know, it's a selfish love, is what it is. But then, on the flip side, Luke, later, with his selfless love for his father, gave Anakin the strength to destroy Vader, destroy Palpatine, and be redeemed. An emotional connection that saved the day. Something that the Jedi of the prequel era would have frowned upon, but it ended up saving the day. The Jedi were wrong in so many ways. But here's the trick. It's the Jedi Order that had gone astray, not the idea of the Jedi. The Jedi did not need to end. They needed to rethink. Luke learned through the course of his story arc in The Last Jedi that the Jedi needed to be reborn. And he learned it when he says to his nephew, the Jedi are reborn today. Luke learned, and Luke was right, and learned from Rey. Luke was right about the Jedi Order having gone astray. But he was wrong about the Jedi needing to end. So I imagine that now Rey is going to restart the Jedi Order on the right track. Luke went and found the sacred Jedi texts on Ahch-To, and I imagine that those texts painted a very different picture. Painted the picture of what the Jedi Order is supposed to be. Something that the Jedi Order at the time of the prequels had lost sight of. So Luke was right and he was wrong. It was time for the Jedi to end their dogmatic thinking. But he was wrong about needing the Jedi to be gone from the universe. Lord Santeca, the old wise man at the beginning of The Force Awakens, says without the Jedi there can be no balance in the Force. And I absolutely agree. Now, I have spoken at length about what balance means to me. But let me just recap it. Balance is the natural order of the galaxy. Light and dark, peace and violence, those things are natural. The Jedi are the guardians of that balance. Their job is to keep an eye out for those who seek to manipulate the natural order. That's what Luke teaches Rey in The Last Jedi. That lesson, I imagine, is in the sacred Jedi texts. The foundation of the Jedi Order. Something that the Jedi Order, the prequels, have lost sight of. And their hubris had brought them to that point. And it was time to rethink. It reminds me of when Jesus came. The Old Testament that had prophesied of the coming of the Messiah. the Old Testament lays out very specific laws and ordinances that the Jewish people needed to follow. When Jesus came, he said, I have not come to destroy the law, but to fulfill. Jesus taught that it was time for the old ways to be fulfilled, not to end, but to truly have their fulfillment and a new way of looking at them. That is exactly what happens in over the course of The Last Jedi and the sequel trilogy in general. The Jedi Order does not need to be destroyed, but things need to be fulfilled, rethought, and like Jesus did, bring the focus back to what it should be. So that's exactly the lesson that Luke learned, and that we all learned in The Last Jedi. So those are my thoughts on the matter. Let me know what you think about the Jedi Order. Did they need to restart? Do you agree with my interpretation? Do you not agree with my interpretation? Let me know what you think. Art is subjective. Everyone should and is entitled to a different point of view, depending on how they see it. Thank you so much for tuning in to Page Turners They Were Not, my Star Wars podcast. May the Force be with you.